So let's talk squat setup. So there's a bunch of different things to think of for a squat, but one of the biggest things to think of is everyone's squat will look a little different just based on your hip anatomy. So those that have a long femur, like myself, what you're going to find is when you're in squat position, you have to angle yourself forward quite a bit when you're in the squat. Whereas if you have a shorter femur, you can be fairly upright in the squat. So that's kind of the first thing, is that everyone's squat will look a little different based on their hip anatomy. Second thing is just general feet placement. So generally you want to start with shoulder width to start, see how that feels, and then play around with your stance based on what feels comfortable for you to get into a deep squat. So one thing you can kind of play around with is grab something like a upright bar and play around with your stance and where you should be able to feel comfortable and sit there without falling back. So for me, for example, not the proper setup, so you want to go a little wider. For me, I just know from personal experience that I have to go a little wider than shoulder width and toe out. So toeing out is very subtle, so you can kind of just kind of 10-15 degrees, not going 45. But what that allows is, based on the anatomy of what's happening with your femur in the hip socket, it allows you more range of motion. So as you toe out, it just changes how that femur sits in the hip socket and gives you kind of more depth. So once again, someone like myself, I'm gonna sit up here. Here feels pretty stable. I can sit there, hang out. And the whole goal of being into a squat is to be able at the bottom to feel comfortable, like you have good pressure throughout your foot so that you're not feeling it all over. Another thing to think about with a squat's a more natural movement, but if you're comparing to a deadlift, a squat is vertical movement of your hips. So your hips are going up and down. So what ends up happening, your knee drives forward, whereas with a deadlift, it's horizontal movement of your hips. So back, kind of here and forth. So that's one thing to kind of know. I mean, a squat's a little more natural. The deadlift is a movement that we don't typically do. So that's where you really have to understand what's happening with the hips. But let's go through a few variations. So we're gonna go over a goblet squat as well as a barbell back squat. So one thing to know with both setups is that the idea with a squat is trying to get our center of mass kind of between our hips. So whether your weight's here, like in a goblet squat, or the weight's on your back in a back squat, which I'll kind of go over in a sec, you have to move your body in a way that allows you to get that center of mass between your feet. If you don't, your body's gonna kind of tell you. So if your center of mass goes too far backwards, you might fall backwards, which obviously is not great. But if the center of mass drifts too far forward, what ends up happening is your lower back kicks in to kind of help balance you to that spot. So when you're doing a back squat or a goblet squat or any squat variation, you shouldn't feel like a lower back pump. You should feel a stabilization aspect, especially in back squat where you have a weight up top pressing down on you. So those are some of the main things to think. So let's actually go through an example. So the goblet squat, what you're gonna do, grab it like this, but kind of play around with whatever your foot placement preference is. So in my case, a little wider than shoulder width, go out a little bit, down, back like this. So kind of from the side, what that looks like. Because I have a weight in front of me, my goblet squat swipe will a little different than my back squat, which we'll go over in a second. So because of that, just because I have weight in front of me, it allows me to get more weight behind me. So that's where your goblet squat might look a little different than your back squat, where if we do back squat, so because the weight's on top of me, I don't have the weight in front of me like I did with the goblet squat. It can look a little different. So for me, it looks something like this. I'll do some side in a sec here. So for the side angle, I'm just going to put a little bit of weight on there, just to show and allow me to have a little more weight on there. I find with just the bar, it's hard to really, for me, with my kind of longer femur, have that proper technique. And then the other thing to think of with the barbell back squat is that you want the bar to rest kind of on the little bit of meat of your shoulder kind of blade. So if you can think of your shoulder blade kind of like a little wing, and it kind of sit on just the ridge. So there should be a little bit of piece of meat there. And how you encourage that is you want to kind of pull down the bar and pull back. If you're just relaxed, that bar is going to kind of sit almost flat on your vertebrae. So I won't get into subtleties of a high or low back squat, but just know that you kind of want to get that position where you're going to pull down, create a shelf for the bar to sit on, so that the bar itself is not sitting on your vertebrae. So the back squat from the side looks a little something like this. You can get in that squat position. Me, I like to kind of play around here to find that neat push up. So you should notice, camera angle might not quite get it, but the bar's not going to go forward or backward as I squat. It should, for the most part, kind of stay in the same plane. As if you were to draw a marker from the top to the bottom, it doesn't kind of leave that path. Whereas if I go forward like this, my lower back's got to use a lot of work to kind of keep myself upright. So if you feel like your lower back's working a lot during a squat, it's all because you're doing that. Then if I fall backwards, my center mass goes behind me, I'm actually going to fall backwards. So one of the more common things I see with barbell back squats is just that bar path moving forward. And that ends up aggravating the lower back a lot because it has to do a lot of work to keep that center mass back. So think of it, when you're doing your squats, you want that kind of center mass kind of here. And for the most part, when you're doing a squat, center mass is this barbell. So a few other things to think about when you're squatting is everything I've said, but then a few other little pointers would be, you want good pressure through your full foot. So when I talk with clients, it's kind of like a triangle foot. So you want big toe, little toe, heel pressure. You can have equal pressures throughout those three. So you gotta find that squat technique that allows you to have that nice equal pressure in your foot. And then one last thing to consider is just general knee kind of movement. So when you're squatting, you don't want your knees to go inside of your big toe. You kind of want it to be in line with your second and third toe for the most part. And one way to encourage that is as you're descending into the squat, you want to think of you're going to apply outward pressure. That's one kind of cue you can use, or you can try to think of you're trying to split a sheet of paper between your feet. So when you're going down, you're kind of twisting. You're not actually going to turn it, but you're going to kind of apply a twisting pressure to drive the knees out. That's one way to think of it. Another cue I use with clients is big toe pressure while driving the knees out. It just allows you to keep that equal pressure. And what you might find is that the ridge of your foot the arc naturally kind of gets created there to help you get that equal pressure throughout. So another cue that can help for back squats is, because the weight's up here, what can help is at the bottom of the squat, you almost want to feel like you're down here, you're going to push backwards as you go up. What that does is just it helps prevent yourself kind of falling forward and letting that center mass kind of come forward. Those are some of the biggest things to think about a squat. You got to play around with it. It might take a while. You may never perfect it. It might just get better. Then as you add more weight, you realize where your weaknesses are. But the whole idea with the squat is to kind of get in that position, feel nice and stable, and then be able to push out. Once again, the whole idea is to keep that center mass kind of between your feet. It's not on your forefoot like your toes, but like right in the middle of your stance. You have to move your body in a way that allows that center mass to kind of be maintained.